Hi and welcome to the third part of the Bruder series of videos which I've been doing. In the first video, if you've seen it, you will have seen how I modified the 16th scale Land Rover and fitted it with grade electronics and a Tamiya gearbox, and it actually worked surprisingly well. So encouraged by that, I then modified the trailer from a Bruder tractor set, and that was for a boat which I actually modified a couple of years ago, a Nico Sea Ray. Now in this third video, the focus is actually going to be on the boat itself, and I would call this converting the Nico boat into a Bruder boat really. And in the last video I did highlight how whilst the boat is about the right size overall to go with the 16th scale Bruder range, actually being a 20th scale boat, the seats are much too small, and the steering wheel, which I've already taken out, actually gives the scale away as being much smaller. And as I showed last time, you can't actually get a man to sit in it because these fake seats aren't in anything like the right position. So I've been modifying this boat, and before I get started, I think I'd like to point out that the point of this video isn't so much to explain how to modify this particular boat. These are fairly rare, and what I'm wanting to do is to show more generically how you might go about modifying a boat of about 16th scale to put with the Bruder models. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing which I did, and if I just take the battery cover out, and I'll remove the windscreen for now, was to remove the installed battery holder. Now the battery holder is probably something that's going to go into my bits and pieces box, because I could see that potentially being useful for another project another day. The inside of the boat, which was what I did last year, has a standard servo in the back. If you're doing anything like this, because water is bound to get into these things, either up the prop shaft, splashing over the side or whatever, what I did was actually got a plastic bag and I put that in underneath the servo before I put it in. It's always worth thinking about waterproofing the bottom of a servo unless you're using waterproof servo. I took out all of the original electronics, and the next thing that I had to decide was what I would use for the seats of the boat. Now I didn't really want to make anything from scratch, and I quite like the way with a lot of the Bruder models you can actually secure the people in position on their seats with little clips. So in the garden, knocking around, there happened to be the ready-made solution to it, and it was in the form of a Bruder Gator. I think it's a John Deere Gator. Now I'm not sure if I would have gone out and bought one for this purpose, but the kids have been playing with it for a couple of years and it was a bit broken and not really being used, and so what I did was I dismantled it and I kept the centre part of the chassis, the bonnet and the seats. And if I just quickly show you, it's always easier said than done. The man happily sits in there. He can hold the steering wheel because obviously it's already in the right position, and you've even got room, if you want it, for a passenger to sit in there. The next challenge was how to get this to sit inside the boat, and what I did was, while I was taking the thing apart, I kept all the bits and I was fiddling around experimenting, and this part here, which is, I think it's part of the chassis and I think it's towards the front of the Gator, seemed to hold this in the right place. So So I stuck it down last night with some epoxy and I left it to dry, and I've actually drilled out a hole there with a corresponding screw here, and the thing will just screw on and it holds itself in place. I'll come back to that in a minute. Whenever you're doing this sort of thing, it's always worth thinking about how easy it is to be able to use the model when it's all fully assembled, and there are two things in particular which I tend to make sure that I think about, and I'm a bit patient about rather than just throwing the thing together. The first thing is where to put the battery, and the point here is it could go underneath the hatch, in which case I'd have to build a hatch. If it was inside the model entirely, it would mean that I would have to have a means of charging it. I couldn't swap batteries out, and if I did want to get to the battery I'd have to take the model apart. So that was something I thought quite carefully about, and again I'll come to that in a moment. The other thing is where to put an on-off switch. You can just leave a speed controller alive all of the time, but then what it means is you have to disconnect the battery every time you're not using it, and there's much more danger of leaving the thing on, and if you're using LiPo batteries you will kill the batteries. So what I did was I actually installed the switch on the dashboard here in front of the passenger, so it's easy to get to, and I think it was worth the few minutes investment which I spent doing it. For the speed controller I'm just using an M-Tronics Viper 15 amp. The reason I'm using this speed controller in particular is because the Viper Marine speed controllers are waterproof. Water's going to get in here, and the one thing that you don't want is the boat having water come into it and then it just stopping in the middle of a lake where you've either got to wade out or you've got to say goodbye to the model. So that's that. In terms of the installation, I'll just move the camera. In terms of the installation, as I said, I've already drilled a hole here, similarly a hole in the bottom there, and I've got a self-tapping screw going through, and I know that works quite well. I'll just move the wires out of the way. Now this will actually happily sit about there, and then the speed controller is going to go down the side here, and the battery actually slides inside here from inside the boat, and specifically it's with the wire this way around so that you've got something to grab hold on to pull it back out with. Before I go screwing this in, there are a couple of other quick jobs which I need to do. Having tested the boat in the water, I know that the battery is heavier than the speed controller, and the boat leans slightly to one side. Well, if you want the boat to look right in the water and to go along nice and straight, you need to make up for that. And having tested it, I've just got a piece of lead here which I know is the right weight, and I'm going to stick it on the side about there. That's that. The next thing to do is to stick the speed controller in, and that's going to go that way around here. I could have put it further back or further forward, but I actually wanted to have it opposite the battery because that's going to even the weight out better. Always clean the back of one of these speed controllers with isopropyl alcohol first, because otherwise they just fall off after a while. I found that every time. Round about there should be fine. Now I actually measured how much of this wire that I wanted, because I put some more wire onto the end of the speed controller, and I want plenty of wire around so that I can actually easily plug the thing in before I post it into the boat when it's being used, and that seemed about right. Just want to route it so that it's not going to interfere with anything. that should be okay. Then the next thing to do is to install this. When I was fixing this with the epoxy last night, I actually had the thing screwed together and I had the top of the boat on so that I could get everything aligned. I've only unscrewed it since. That's about right. That's better. Good. So that's all that in position. The next thing to do is to fit the receiver. Right, so with the receiver, and I have pounded it and checked it, what I've decided to do is to have it this way up so that if any water does get in, it's going to run out, but not have it right on the very bottom of the boat. And I wanted the wires, particularly the one from the speed controller, to be able to reach without the need for a servo extension lead. So it's going to go just here. This will also allow me to route the aerial. I think that the point here is to think about where the components go in order to make life easier for yourself further down the road. So I'll just tuck some of these wires away. I don't see a great deal of need to have any cable ties going on in here, but just to put wires really in sensible places. You don't really want the aerial going too close to the motor or the motor's magnets. I think it's far enough away, and by having the aerial over here, it means that I can actually have the aerial sticking out of the boat there, because 2.4 gigahertz radio does not like water, so you really want to avoid having this part of the aerial, the live part, below the water line, because you could have loss of signal. It's also better to have it straight up for it to be able to communicate well with the transmitter. Right, well, having done all of that, I think it's time to put the roof on. I'll just put this power cable wire here. Yeah, I'm happy with where the wires are. And I'll post the aerial through the official aerial hole. That goes nicely, and it's still sticking up by the time I move it into position. Right, well, that's everything lined up. Just put the boat on its stand. So, just move the camera a bit. So everything seems to fit quite nicely. So all I need to do now is put the reining screws in, get a piece of aerial tube, put that on here to protect the aerial and to keep it vertical, and then the windscreen will go here, and seeing as this is the final fitting, I'm just going to put a small splodge of canopy glue there to hold it all together. So that's the screws. Okay, now the battery's actually been slid down, and even though it's not the prettiest thing to be able to seal these wires, what that does mean is I can actually pull the wires out for connecting and disconnecting, and it makes it easier to get the battery out. And so there's plenty of room for the driver and the passenger if I want to. Just trying to be careful not to knock the window out of alignment while it's drying. It's easier actually to move him around with pliers. Right, okay, so we've got the driver there. I could have a passenger in there as well if I wanted. Now you may have spotted these perhaps odd looking hoops which I put on, and I think that they're just for picture framing. And the reason I did this was, you might have heard in the previous video that when I tried to have the boat sliding off this trailer into the water, it was too much for the Land Rover to handle, and I hinted that maybe the solution was going to be a Bruder crane. Well, since that video I've actually picked one of those cranes up, and radio controlling that I think is going to be a pretty mammoth project in itself. But the idea is that that crane will be what lifts this boat from the trailer into the water. I thought that the last thing that I would do in this video before running the boat is just make up something for the winch to hold on to. Right, well, here we have the crane, and it has its stabilising legs, so the thing won't fall over. It's actually got 4 of those, but I'll just put 2 of them out for what we're doing here. There you go, we'll keep it still, and by a series of knobs you can extend the arm out. You can even make it longer, and you can wind it up. By the time I've finished with this as a project, I'm expecting to have automated all of the functions, but that's going to be a big and separate project in itself. So let's just get that over here. So I'm going to be wanting to lift from about there, so I'll put that in place. What I've got to do is I've got to make some arrangement for wires to come off the hook and attach to these 4 bits here. For the part which goes onto the boat, I got these, you can see, and they actually clip in, but for the sake of this I'm going to leave them clipped out. And these came from a cheap sea fishing kit which I bought a few years ago on holiday, and with these they will clip on easy enough, they won't fall off, and go away fly, and they will come off quite easily. And what I was thinking was that I'll use some wire which originally I used for radio control aircraft for the rigging wires to actually attach this all to. I think that's probably a better idea than rope, because it will kind of stay in place. So with this wire, the way that it works is you use these little aluminium tubes. Just be very careful not to lose them out here, because I'd never find them if I dropped any. Just get those out. So you thread this through, like so, bring it round, pull it tight, and then just get a pair of pliers and crimp it, then that's not going to go anywhere. And so that will allow me to attach it to the boat, and then I'm going to want to come up and then go down on the other side. Using another one of these to form the loop that goes over the hook. So I'll just thread that through. Then move it back on itself, like so. And that will form a loop to go over the hook, and I'm going to leave that loose so it moves around so that I can adjust it if I want to, and I'm sure that the boat won't be the only thing being lifted by this crane, so that'll be a general purpose item. Right, that all seems about right, so I'll just chop off the excess. I suppose in real life you'd have somebody standing there holding a rope keeping it straight. And it seems to lift the weight of the boat with no trouble whatsoever, and the boat is sitting fairly level. Good. Swinging around a bit though. Now the crane does extend quite a bit more with this extra piece on the top, and that's what I'm going to use for the test. I'm interested to see if it can actually hold it. Obviously the thing to do now is to give the boat a quick go in some real water.
Wind goes down, Quran, loud, oh, it's stalling there.
Right, so in conclusion to the video, I'm extremely pleased with how the Bruder conversion to the Nico toy boat has worked out. I couldn't have imagined it being better than this, to be quite honest. It's certainly going to give this little boat another lease of life, and what it started me on is obviously the crane project, which is going to take some time. Anyway, as ever, if you've got any comments, I'd love to hear them in the comments box below, and if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. It encourages me to do more of these, and until the next time, thank you for watching.